Pranitaha. All right. Word to word meaning. Shri Prahlada Uvacha. Prahlad Maharaj replied, Na, not. Kevalam, only. Me, of me. Bhavataha, of yourself. Cha, and. Rajan, O great king. Saha, he. Vai, indeed. Balam, strength. Balinam, of the strong. Cha, and. Aparesham, of others. Pare, exalted. Avare, subordinate. Ami, those. Sthira jangamaha, moving or non-moving living entities. Ye, who. Brahmadayah, beginning from Lord Brahma. Yena, by whom. Vasham, under control. Pranitaha, bought. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation. Prahlad Maharaj said, My dear king, the source of my strength, of which you are asking, is also the source of yours. Indeed, the original source of all kinds of strength is one. He is not only your strength or mine, but the only strength for everyone. Without him, no one can get any strength, whether moving or non moving, superior or inferior. Everyone, including Lord Brahma, is controlled by the strength of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport. Lord Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Yadyad vibhuti matsatvam shrimadujitamev va tatat evavagachatvam mama tejomsha sambhavam. Know that all beautiful, glorious, and mighty creations spring from but a spark of my splendor. This is confirmed by Prahlad Maharaj. If one sees extraordinary strength or power anywhere, it is derived from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. To give an example, there are different grades of fire, but all of them derive heat and light from the sun. Similarly, all living entities, big or small, are dependent on the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One's only duty is to surrender, for one is a servant and cannot independently attain the position of master. One can attain the position of master only by the mercy of the master, not independently. Unless one understands this philosophy, he is still a mudha. In other words, he is not very intelligent. The mudhas, the asses who do not have this intelligence, cannot surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Understanding the subordinate position of the living entity takes millions of births, but when one is actually wise, he surrenders unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord says in the Bhagavad Gita, Bahunam janmanam ante jnanavan mam prapadyate vasudeva sarvamiti samahatma sudurlabha. After many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare. Prahlad Maharaj was a great soul, a Mahatma, and therefore he completely surrendered unto the lotus feet of the Lord. He was confident that Krishna would give him protection under all circumstances. ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनाशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिन् इति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देश तारिणे जय श्री कृष्णा चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंदा श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त वृंदा हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. Hare Krishna. So Narsingh Dev is going to appear very soon in next few verses. And what triggered that appearance of Narsingh Dev is this conversation that we are discussing now. So very, very significant and very dramatic point in the whole pastime, right? So because now Prahlad Maharaj is very subtly challenging Hiranyakashipu. Is he challenging his strength? Is he challenging his position? Is he challenging his wealth? He is challenging his worldview, his philosophy, right? And because if you see this verse and the previous verse, if you see that question that Hiranyakashipu asked yesterday, that uh, you have violated my, yeah, even before that, he questions him. Yeah, sixth verse, right? Yes. By whose power has a rascal like you become so impudent that you appear fearless and overstep my power to rule you? Right? So this clearly shows a difference in two different worldviews, Prahlad Maharaj's worldview and Hiranyakashipu, that of a devotee and a materialistic person. So for a materialistic person, one is driven by one's own strength, one's own abilities, one's own connections, one's own wealth, etc. Whereas a devotee's life is driven by grace. So this is such a stark difference in the worldview because Hiranyakashipu could not comprehend वो किसके बल पे इतना मेरे सामने खड़े हो रहा है ये. By whose strength this fellow, this little boy is able to even stand in front of me. Because the ordinary way of thinking is, right, only when you know that, like in Ramayana also we see this, when Sugriva knew that Ram is behind me, then he had the strength to go and challenge Bali. Otherwise, he had no adhikar to go and even forget about challenging. Even he was not even near his province. He was hiding in the Kishkinda Kshetra, right? So the ordinary materialistic thinking is where we engage in some action when we know we have the strength and backing for it, right? Even sometimes in among devotees also this mentality creeps in, right? Like if some 10 services are put in front of you, you will naturally choose that service which you know you can do, right? Which you have the, because say let's say you already have some accounting skills, then you'll pick up accounting seva, right? If you already have some shastric skills, you will take up to preaching seva, right? So our thought, that is again nothing wrong, we are at least being true to our nature, but this is still materialistic thinking, worldly thinking, where one's actions are driven by one's abilities. But here Prahlad Maharaj is raising our worldview that hey, uh, it's not about, an action is motivated not by accumulation of ability but by accumulation of our adhikar, by our qualification. So in the scriptures, it is described at how Krishna has unlimited energies, Parasha Shakti Vivdeva Shruyate, but he has three important energies, Swabhaviki, Jnana, Bala, Kriyacha. So knowledge, Bala, desire, Ichha, and Kriya, action, right? Now, the living entity being part and parcel of the Lord also shares these three same energies. Living entity also has Jnana, Bala, and Kriya energies. It is just that not all of them are in his control. Because who is controlling the Kriya of the living entity? Like when I'm able to speak right now, how are my words coming? How are you able to hear my words? Because my vocal cords are vibrating, right? What is vibrating those vocal cords? When the vocal cords vibrate, that vibrates the air, right? So you can say some nervous signals and blah, 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 right? So basically all this is being done by my physical body, which is a part of Prakriti. So Prakriti is controlling our Kriya Shakti, right? And when you ask me a question, I have to think and answer. I can't read your mind. It's not a scripted class where, like a TV show where this question will be asked and this answer you have to give, right? So it's not a scripted podcast that we are doing right now. So when you ask some spontaneous question which I don't know, how am I able to think and give you the answer? Where is my knowledge coming from? Paramatma is giving that knowledge, right? So even the jnana potency is also controlled not by us but by Paramatma. So if kriya is controlled by prakriti, jnana is controlled by Paramatma. So Ishvara is controlling my jnana, prakriti is controlling my kriya. Then what am I doing? One may ask. We are simply controlling, expressing our ichha, that bala, ichha. That ichha shakti is what that the jiva has. So, which means I can only desire. That's the only thing I can do in this world, right? So, what triggers all action basically is our ichha. Because we read in the Bhagavad Gita also in the 5th chapter, because Paramatma is controlling your thoughts, you cannot blame Paramatma for the crimes that you commit. Neither can you say that, oh, Prakriti is the culprit. She should be punished, not me. Right? All this, even the Paramatma's grace and Prakriti's action, both are finally triggered from the Jiva's desire, the Ichha Shakti. Therefore, this is a very important understanding because spiritual life means how to channelize our Ichha by Paramatma's direction to utilize Prakriti. Three things I mentioned here. One, we are to utilize Prakriti. Second, we need to be directed by Paramatma. And third, we need to channelize our desire. So therefore, Krishna consciousness is all about desire engineering, desire management, ichha management. That's all we need to do. Everything else is beyond us, right? So therefore, these three things are very important to take care of in our life: the right intentions, the right direction, and the right action. Basically, life means all just these three things. If you manage these three things, your intentions, your direction, and your action, that's it. You don't have to worry about anything else. So simple, right? Only three things, three tasks we have to do in our life, right? So now the materialistic worldview focuses only on the action part, right? If you whatever is needed to focus on the action, like Hiranyakashipu is a classical example of that. If you see, he achieved very high levels of perfection in life. But the problem with Hiranyakashipu is he may have mastered his actions, but he never mastered his intentions. That is why mere development of siddhis does not indicate one's exalted nature. Because siddhis can come even through tapasya. Even Hiranyakashipu can develop siddhis. So there's nothing extra, there's nothing spiritual about developing siddhis, right? That's why, whereas the devotional life is about focusing on the intentions, purifying our intentions, right? And that's where the question comes: what prevents the proper channelizing of our intentions? Why do you think our intentions are impure? Question to all of you. Why do you think our intentions become impure? What do you think is the root cause? Desires. Therefore, we should not have desires, right? Okay. Or certain past desires are there. Actually, this is a very important answer you gave because we're going to elaborate on this. Yes, Prabhu. Desire to enjoy separate from the Lord, right? So, very nice. So where does this desire, what is the cause for this desire to enjoy separate from the Lord? I mean, the answer is in the question itself. Uh, the word here is that identity separate from the Lord, right? That's the root cause of all this problem. So this false identity that I am something different, asmita, that is a root cause of the false intentions. And the ignorance, avidya, is a root cause of false knowledge. And that ahankara, aham karoti, I am the doer, is a root cause of false actions. So all these three things, asmita, ahankara, and avidya, is what we are trying to purify, is what we are trying to overcome through our spiritual practices. So, what is the way to overcome this? So, the Prabhupada in this purport, he writes that how that one's only duty is to surrender. For one is a servant and cannot independently attain the position of master. So, the solution to this whole asmita, avidya, ahankara, right? The false doership. So all these three, it finally boils down to the principle of surrender, something we heard many times. But objectively speaking, what does it take to surrender? What do you think it takes to surrender? What leads to surrender? Sorry, Prabhu? Purify the heart. What does that purification of the heart lead to? Faith, okay? Humanity, you said? Humility, okay? Okay, very good. Very good. Little more. Yeah, you're all near the bullseye. Yes, Prabhu. What from material misery? Frustration from material misery. Okay. That leads to surrender. Okay, nice. I mean, it may begin your journey, artho, arthati, right? It may begin your journey of trying to connect to the Lord, but we are talking about little more mature stage of surrender here. I am not the doer. Okay, very good. Subsiding our false ego. Very nice. So if you carefully see, the common theme of all the answers that you gave is where we understand our proper position, right? But there is one more thing missing. While you understand your position, there also has to be the right purpose. Surrender basically means being properly situated in your position and purpose. Both are very important, right? Because when you understand your position and when the purpose is missing, you will at best become maybe something like a Brahmavadi or something. Or maybe maximum you will attain some kind of Sayuja Mukti, right? Because your position wise, you are very clear, right? I am not the doer, I am not the enjoyer, material world is not the right place. You understand all that. But when the purpose factor is missing, then the next step will not happen, right? So if you see in our last class also, we discussed how Prahlad Maharaj essential teachings is all about the Sambandha Gyan, about how I am not the body and how my source is the supreme spirit. So when that position is understood, that is the first step. But along with position also comes the understanding of purpose. So we'll talk about this purpose part at the end of this class, but we'll talk what happens when these two things are not clear. What is exactly happening in Hiranyakashipu's mind? Because if you see here, Hiranyakashipu is expressing a lot of anger. In fact, in the previous verse also, he says, Kudrasya, you have angered me. So what is the cause of this anger of Hiranyakashipu? If you see, Hiranyakashipu's anger was purely born out of his insecurity. Because for the first time, somebody successfully managed to threaten Hiranyakashipu's position. What Indra could not do, what Yamaraj could not do, right? What, even the great devatas were the entire cosmic control, what they could not do, Prahlad Maharaj managed to do, which is trigger his insecurity. And where does this insecurities come from? What is this thing which is which is missing that leads to insecurity? So if you see, when these two aspects, when this When our proper position and purpose, when these two things are missing, that's when we go through insecurities in our life. And when those insecurities mature further, because it is a kind of a internal internally overwhelming and little discomforting stage, we want to pacify the discomfort through some shortcuts, and those shortcuts are called anarthas. So in this case, Hiranyakashipu, he took shelter of the anartha of anger to deal with his insecurity. And if you see all the different personalities, demoniac personalities, they displayed all the anarthas in different pastimes, right? So the problem is, when we want to deal with certain we want to pacify our insecurities rather than trying to process our insecurities. Pacify means, now I'm feeling uncomfortable, so I want to quickly douse this discomfort. So let me just take shelter of some cheap thrills. That is my anartha. Rather, Hiranyakashipu should have paused and questioned himself, what is making me angry in this situation? What did Prahlad Maharaj actually do, successfully manage to do? Because whole world is waiting for my glance to move. The sun is standing there. Suryadev is standing there. Can I rise now? And Hiranyakashipu, okay. The whole world is waiting for Hiranyakashipu's glance to move. And Prahlad Maharaj is completely oblivious. Forget about glance. He is getting direct verbal instructions and Prahlad Maharaj is unfazed. That triggered Hiranyakashipu. You challenged my position. Right? And this, when this, when such insecurities, when they overwhelm us, what happens? It disconnects us from Krishna. That's what happened to poor Hiranyakashipu. And that's when we experience that poverty of the heart. So the whole idea of the journey of Anartha Nivritti is about trying to identify those lacunas in our heart, that poverties, different kinds of shortcomings in our heart, and more so, what are the insecurities that they are creating in our heart. Therefore, detaching from matter is not the solution, it's only a phase in our journey. That's why in our Vaishnava philosophy, detachment is not something that is born out of fear or frustration, but it is born out of love. It's a connection. Many times we think detachment, is it a prerequisite for surrender? No, I think in our last class, Mahagavad Prabhu also asked that question, right? That so we discussed how no, janayati ashu vairagyam jnanam chayata hetukam. That when that Vasudeva Bhagavati, when we engage in devotional service, then naturally knowledge and detachment they come. Therefore, the proper way to deal with this insecurities and detaching from these insecurities, it comes when we are properly situated in our right position. And when it comes to dealing with this detachment, there is a small subtle point which I was reading this book, Vaishnav K. And in that, His Holiness Jayaprakash Goswami Maharaj gave a very nice commentary. There's one specific verse I would like to, paragraph, uh, I would like to recite. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati writes as follows. He says, Yatha yogya bhoga nahi tatha roga, anasakta sei ki ara kabha, आसक्ति रहित संबंध सहित विषय समूह सकली माधव. He says that yatha yogya bhoga. So this word yogya bhoga I found very interesting. He says that, so there are these two things, two mindsets that we have. One is a diseased mindset. The diseased mindset is what we think is where we are indulging in sense gratification, right? So then what would be the healthy mindset? If diseased mindset is engaging in sense gratification, what would be the healthy mindset? Oh, very nice, deep answer. But if you just logically extrapolate, people would say not engaging in sense gratification, right? Yeah, we'll come to that. That's a deeper understanding, of course, right? So, not engaging sense gratification. So, this word yogya bhoga, it caught my attention. And in that purport, Maharaj he writes that how that in the course of execution of devotional service, there is enjoyment, right? And this is a point that we need to understand. For example, uh, how does the body get its energy? We hear this analogy of stomach being the source. You have to, all the limbs of the body are finally trying to nourish the stomach. Now, when you're trying to nourish the stomach, does your tongue enjoy or not? When you are nourishing the stomach through gulab jamun, you put the gulab, the finger touches the gulab jamun, the finger enjoys the soft texture of gulab jamun. You may say that is not so much of enjoyment anyway. But the gulab jamun is placed on your tongue. Is the tongue enjoying or not? Right? So is it a sin? It's natural. In the course of serving the stomach, the tongue experiences enjoyment. So we are not resisting that, we are not resisting that enjoyment. Problem comes when the finger is only crushing the gulab jamun and says, I will only enjoy. I will not give it to the tongue. Or even worse, the tongue says, I will not swallow it. I will just keep it in my mouth all day. Right? Because I want to, because the sense and the sense object as a contact time increases, more the enjoyment, they say. So let me just keep it on my tongue. That is a problem. But when in the course of chewing that gulab jamun and serving the stomach, because if you swallow the gulab jamun as it is, right, then what will happen? So one devotee was once sharing that uh, in our Pune temple, this was very energetic, enthusiastic brahmachari had come from the west for a few days, and he used to love halwa, like so much so that apparently he ate a bucket load of halwa. I don't know how much exaggeration that is, but what happened later is definitely true, to the point where he had to be taken to the hospital and some surgery had to be performed to remove the halwa out of his system, right? So, so definitely we are not talking about that kind of overindulgence here. But in the course of chewing of that gulab jamun, when the tongue tastes the gulab jamun, you know, it is just the secondary effect, the concomitant effect, right? So the point here is that overindulgence is bad, but avoiding matter is worse. Why? Because, in the Ishopanishad also, that how both Vidya and Avidya both need to be transcended, right? So the understanding there here is that how if the path of karma, just pure path of karma, I think Prabhuji was talking about that karmavad philosophy. If that alone, if it will take you to hell, the the superficial detachment, the superficial renunciation, where you are completely avoiding matter itself, it will take you to even deeper hell, right? So this, therefore, all this understanding, it comes when you are properly rooted in the right position, that matter is also an energy of the Lord, and therefore it needs to be engaged in the service of the Lord. And that brings us about to the second aspect. While clarity of position is there also has to be clarity of purpose. And so if being properly situated in your position is the sambandha, being properly executing your action according to a higher purpose is your abhideya. And that is what is Prahlad Maharaj trying to teach here, that look, my dear father, my dear Hiranyakashipu, yes, you have your strength, I have my strength, but both of our strengths are coming from that one Supreme Lord. The problem is, I am trying to engage my strength according to the purpose of the Lord, whereas you are not. So when he's inspiring Hiranyakashipu to surrender, he's inspiring him that align your purpose with the Supreme Lord. Therefore, when we talk about this oneness of the individual soul and the super soul, that oneness is not just a qualitative oneness, but also oneness of purpose. So qualitative oneness we understand. Prabhupada gives a famous example of the drop of ocean in the ocean, right? So we share the qualitative oneness, but when uh, how that oneness has to be understood in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, very beautifully in Adrila 7th chapter, very beautifully while describing the Panchatattva, Kaviraj Goswami makes a very interesting statement. He says that all these Panchatattvas, they are one vastu. Panchatattva eka vastu. Nahi kichu bhed. There is no difference. Now, if you just read the first line, it may sound like monoism. But the second line brings about clarity why the difference exists. He says, Rasa aswadite tabu vibhida vibhed. That for the sake of experience of rasa, the difference exists. So the different, so the ontologically the living entities, though they are different, that oneness comes because they all are aligned in that purpose. So when the purpose of seva is clear, the purpose of serving the Supreme Lord is clear, that is a step beyond the position. So understanding your position is one thing, understanding your connection is one thing. But when that purpose also becomes clear, when both position and purpose are aligned, that is when this principle of surrender manifests in one's life. Therefore, Prahlad Maharaj here is instructing Narsinghdev that understand this subordinate position of yours and align your purpose with the Supreme Lord. So I was hearing Srila Prabhupada's lecture on, Prabhupada gave one lecture on Radhashtami. So if you see his 95% of his entire class, he's hammering the same point. Position, position, position. The Sambandha Gyan, the position of the living entity, right? So if you see, therefore, this proper sambandha leads to proper abhideya and that leads to right prayojan. So we cannot superficially jump the gun just by meditating on the prayojan, but with weak sambandha and abhideya, we cannot bring about this internal mood of surrender. So that is the principle that we need to understand. I'd like to conclude with a very nice point on this principle of purpose. So, Srila Prabhupada's very esteemed god brother, His Holiness Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Swami Maharaj, in one of the purports, in his commentary to Nectar of Instruction, in one of the purports, he writes this very interesting esoteric statement. He says, what is Vrindavan? He says, Vrindavan is that place which is decorated by the lotus feet of Radharani everywhere. Now, when you read that statement, it may sound, oh, lotus feet of Radharani, footprints are everywhere. Oh, which means that devotee is feeling separation from Radharani or he's only seeing Radharani everywhere, right? So then he clarifies what that statement means. What does it mean to see the lotus footprints of Radharani everywhere? When do you see footprints of any person? When the person goes somewhere. Why will a person go somewhere? So, what is Radharani's purpose? To serve Krishna, to give pleasure to Krishna. Which means the consciousness of Radharani is she sees potential for Krishna's service in every nook and corner of Vrindavan. That is why her footprints are everywhere. So this is the consciousness of a servant of the Lord. This is the consciousness when we're talking about trying to follow in the footsteps of Srimati Radharani. What it means is the ability to see Krishna's service in every nook and corner. That is Vrindavan. Right? Though it's a geographical state, and Prabhupada many times he also says that Vrindavan is also a state of consciousness. So what is that state of where one sees the ability the potential for Krishna's service in every nook and corner, because that's the only purpose of such a devotee's life and their existence. And that is what being Krishnamayi means. Later on, also, Prahlad Maharaj says that how he's what do I say? He's overwhelmed by the Krishna Graha. His entire mind, because the grahas, they influence your mind, right? So his mati is completely influenced by the Krishna Graha, right? So that is the same consciousness of being Krishnamayi. And that's what Prahlad Maharaj is trying to inspire his father, right? And the exact opposite of that is being Vishayamayi, where you are only absorbed in sense objects. And the next few verses is going to highlight about this aspect, where how, because of this uncontrolled mind, that is the root cause of this problem, and how he needs to work on that. So that next few speakers will speak about that. So yeah, so basically these are a few thoughts which I wanted to share. I'll quickly summarize what we discussed in today's class. We began by understanding that how there is two worldviews. There's a demoniac worldview and a devotional worldview. Demonic worldview is all about focusing on strength, abilities, as Hiranyakashipu, that was his only aspiration. The divine worldview, devotional worldview, is about a worldview which is driven not by strength but by grace and accumulating that grace. And this, we understood that how, why this accumulation of grace is important, because the jiva cannot do anything on its own. The kriya shakti is controlled by prakriti, the jnana shakti is controlled by paramatma. The only ichha shakti is the only thing that the jiva has within its control. For everything else, it needs the Lord's grace to function, right? And so when you focus too much on the kriya, the action aspect, we develop that materialistic worldview, whereas devotional mindset is about trying to purify the intention. And therefore we said, what prevents that purity of intention? These three factors: the ahankar, false doership; avidya, ignorance, which is counter to true knowledge; right? And the false identity, which purifies our which contaminates our intentions, right? And so this is overcome, as Prabhupada explains in the purport, by developing that mood of surrender. What does surrender mean? Surrender, we spoke about, is when we are rightly situated in our position and purpose. The position aspect we discussed, that whole, the sambandha aspect. The purpose we discussed is about where one is seeing that potential for Krishna's service. And that when that alignment of purpose happens, that's when real oneness is experienced in our life, and that's how we will attain perfection in our life. All right. So that's a few thoughts which I wanted to share. If anybody likes to add something, wants to, any corrections, any suggestions. All right, we'll end the class. Yes, Prabhu.
You were mentioning from this poem of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur that to like enjoying the Vishay who what is befitting. So like there is also one verse in CC that Yatayuga Vishay Vunjo Anasaktoya. So like if we enjoy, then it's very like natural that we will become like attached to the Vishay. But like giving up the Vishay is very easy. But while like enjoying the Vishay but still becoming detached, so it's very difficult. So can you say something about this?
So that's where we need to understand what is the principle of enjoyment. So yeah, in fact, yeah, maybe that point I should have elaborated a little more. The reason why I made that point was, many times we think that devotional life means no enjoyment. You may say, oh, there is higher enjoyment, there is spiritual enjoyment, right? So the point is, many times, because in that Vaishnav K prayer, it's about giving up this false renunciation. So the a false renunciate, because that time Bhakti Siddhanta, he was dealing with these people who were uh, pretending to be this false Babajis. So in that context, he wrote that whole bhajan. So if you see, the understanding is, many times our uh, our focus becomes, I should avoid enjoyment. But when that becomes the primary focus, then we are not thinking along the lines of devotional service. But rather, when the true understanding of devotional service is where, when the analogy I gave of the tongue enjoying and the stomach in the course of serving the stomach is in that context, that yes, there is pleasure in devotional life. And even while engaging in the things of this world, when some pleasure comes, you should not kick yourself saying that, oh, I enjoyed today. Right? The problem is when you think you are the sole enjoyer, or rather, the understanding is that that enjoyment is coming because of my own body and mind. So there is pleasure in this world, right? We have to understand this principle that when you eat food, what is it about food which nourishes your body? Because what is food finally? Some carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, right? What is plastic? Some carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Why is it that when you eat plastic, you don't get nourished? Whereas when you eat rice, which is also carbohydrates, that you get nourished. There is the foodness of food in food, which is not there in plastic, though they are made of same element. So that foodness of food is Krishna. So when you are relishing food, you are saying, oh, it is that Krishnaness in this food which is nourishing me. That is understanding a devotee has. Right? So learning to see not only our connection, but even connection of matter to Krishna. And that is how when you say we are enjoying, the word enjoyment is seen with a negative connotation, right? So we are not trying to just condemn all forms of enjoyment, but rather when you're saying that, oh, when you see the connection of something to Krishna, you coming close to Krishna is giving that enjoyment. Not you eating that rice or that gulab jamun is giving enjoyment, but you coming close to the gulab jamunness of the gulab jamun, to the riceness of rice, to the foodness of food. That is what is giving you pleasure. And that's the vision in the 7th chapter of the Gita, when Krishna talks about seeing him as an intrinsic principle. Even in this purport also, when Prabhupada writes, Yadyat Vibhuti Matsattvam, many quotes, a devotee has to see that, oh, the thingness of a thing is Krishna. And that connection, that vision is what that leads to the proper enjoyment. So it is not that we have to suffer and say, oh, Krishna, you are the only enjoyer. But seeing Krishna as enjoyer will also lead to enjoyment within us. That enjoyment is a proof of our closeness to Krishna. Right? So a devotee actually is very smart. They know how to properly enjoy. They know which is the highest form of enjoyment. Right? So that statement I made was in that context, that we are not here to falsely shun enjoyment as bad, but to think that you are the sole enjoyer or I am the only cause of my enjoyment, that tendency is bad. Right? I hope I, did I confuse you more?
It's that anasaktasya vishayan. This what that how to like while enjoying, of course, prasadam or anything in Krishna service, like sambandha like is Krishna in sambandha of Krishna, but still like while we are enjoying, relishing prasadam or whatever service we are doing, naturally this that we become attached to this service or this preparation of food or prasadam. So, but still, how it will lead to detachment.
See, that attachment raga or the detachment dvesha in themselves are not bad. Raga, which is centered around a false notion, is bad. Again, this is the whole point. This is the whole difference between the bhakti approach and a pure Jnani's approach. Jnani is shunning matter because matter gives enjoyment, enjoyment leads to attachment. The devotional understanding is that to think that I am the enjoyer is the problem, and therefore I purify my false identity as the enjoyer. Therefore, I am not shunning away from matter. I'm trying to stay away from materialism, but not from matter itself. That's why, I mean, we are building such big gigantic structure. Somebody may say, oh, there is so much of money in ISKCON people are all materialistic, right? So just because you are in close proximity to matter, that doesn't make you materialist. One may stay away from matter and always think about matter. That such a person is greater materialist, right? So the whole understanding here is that anasakti comes due to the proper sambandha and not due to vairagya. That difference is what Bhaktisiddhanta is trying to point out in that verse, that when you're properly rooted in that sambandha gyan, that, oh, Krishna, he is the master, he is that Madhava, he is the husband of goddess of fortune. And therefore, everything when is centered around him, in that mindset, whatever happens is for my spiritual upliftment. Therefore, you need to enjoy your spiritual life. That is how you overcome your material samskaras. If you are not enjoying your spiritual life, it becomes very difficult to overcome material samskara. Then spirituality becomes a duty, and that's why it happens when we go through a tough phase in our life. Why do we fall back to material enjoyment? Because for a spiritual life has always been set of rules and regulations. But when it comes to enjoyment, matter. So during those moments when we are emotionally overwhelmed, when the heart becomes weak, we naturally gravitate towards our shelter in material energy. I once attended a holy name retreat by His Grace Mahatma Prabhu. He made us do a very nice exercise, very simple exercise, but very powerful exercise. So he said, so so Nam Jap, ultimately we are trying to surrender to Krishna. So he made us write one statement, right? So he gave half the statement, second half we are supposed to fill. So it's an exercise you all can try. It's a fun exercise. The statement goes as follows: if I surrender to Krishna, then what if blank? Now you have to fill in the blank. If I surrender to Krishna, then what if? So now let your mind fill that blank. And you will see that which are filling in your blank is your greatest attachment. And if I surrender to Krishna completely, then what if my parents fall sick? Who will take care of them? If I fully surrender to Krishna, what if China declares third world war and inflation happens? Then who will take care of my financial security? Right? Whether you're a grasta or a brahmachari, we all have our own insecurities. So that what if, that blank, is what that is delaying our surrender. Right? So that is where our greatest attachment is. So the whole idea is that we don't want to succumb to that samskara of material enjoyment, but rather we need to enjoy our spiritual life. And that is why when Mayavadis, when they say, oh, these Krishna bhaktas, look how they are always dancing and eating feast and, enjoying their life, they say enjoyment is bad. That is not the proper understanding. Just because we are enjoying in Krishna's company, that doesn't make us attached to matter, it makes us attached to Krishna. That is how the rasa develops. So that so the real raga is what we need to develop, right? So anyway, thank you all so much. ग्रंथ श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय, श्री प्रभुपाद की जय, अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय.